welcome to CX Today. My name is Charlie and I'm delighted to welcome you all to the first of our new monthly shows dedicated to all the latest goings on at Salesforce. And joining me for the inaugural episode are two of our favorite customer experience analysts. Yesterday, I'm delighted to be joined by Liz Miller, VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research, and Rebecca Wetteman, CEO and Principal Analyst at Valoir. As always, it's great to have you both join me, and let's get right on into the discussion. And there's only one place to start, really, and that is with the announcement of Agentforce 2.0 coming just before Christmas, and coming just about 3 months after the Agentforce 1.0. Can I say that platform launched? Uh, but I think the best place to start, kind of talking about Agentforce 2.0, I can't even say it, is by thinking about maybe what makes it different to what came before. So I don't know, Rebecca, if you could maybe start by telling us exactly that.
This is all about bringing the pieces together so that customers can rapidly get up to speed and experience agentic AI without data science skills, data integration skills, model tuning and testing skills, all those kinds of things. It's really about democratizing access to agentic AI and putting it into the hands of people quickly. I think the big difference that we see between 2.0 and what we saw at Dreamforce is, yes, with the original Agentforce, I could spin up an agent. What I didn't have was that overall set of tools to test, monitor, deploy, manage, tune. Now that's all built in a meaningful way. So really we're seeing customers be able to get up to speed with RAG, for example, within weeks, where they weren't able to necessarily do that before. So really bringing all of these pieces together to accelerate time to value, but also make it more accessible to more customers.
And I think there's also, as much as there is an Agentforce 2.0 on the Salesforce side of this equation, it's almost like there's an understanding 2.0 on the customer side of the equation, even in that really short 3-month time period. Because customers were really excited about the idea of building. But the reality is the excitement should have been in the idea of deploying. And that's not necessarily where they were with Agent 1.0. It was a lot of, I'm going to build a lot of things. And I think we've all remembered from history of what happens when you build a lot of things and don't connect it to anything. You've got a lot of things. So I think that Agent 2.0 is really, exactly as Rebecca said, more about showing customers that there are pre-built connections. Yes, you want to accomplish this business value. Here are the things that you can build. And by the way, you can build them. You don't have to wait for, a big giant team to be able to do it. So I think there's an understanding bridge that's been crossed by a lot of Salesforce customers. I also think that customers realized very quickly, I really do need Data Cloud. Right? I can't build Agentforce, and yes, I can do some rudimentary things if I connect it to a rudimentary data source, but I need Data Cloud.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Liz. And I think that the recognition that everybody's got data that is not in Salesforce that they need to answer these agentic questions, to complete these agentic tasks. And before 2.0, what we were hearing was, I don't even know how to start. Right? Like, I don't even have an idea about how to do this. An interesting thing, too, if you look at what customers are doing early on with Agentforce, is the way you set up an agent is helping you self-diagnose where your data holes are. Right? So if I build an agent, send it on a task, and it doesn't do it correctly, I need to do either two things: bring in more data or make my instructions more precise. But it enables me as a customer to very quickly say, if I want an agent to do this task, whatever it is stumbling at this point because this data either isn't there, isn't aligned, or isn't harmonized. And now I know what holes I need to plug to make that agent accurate. So it's almost sort of reverse engineering the data hygiene question, which is really cool.
And I will also say that I think that if I'm being fair to Salesforce, I mean, everyone south of the org chart other than Mark Benioff. Okay, let's say, let me be fair to everyone down there. when the top of the org chart's like Agentforce at Dreamforce, and that's all we're going to talk about, getting all the pieces in place can be just as chaotic as getting the keynote in place. And I think we heard a lot from Mark at Dreamforce about like, hey, we scrapped everything and because we're so excited about this, we want to get this out the door. That made it really hard for really important pieces of 2.0 to be in place. And while, yes, absolutely, the data preparation, the data hygiene, all of the data pieces are super important, but there's another piece to the puzzle that now has come into the party, and that's own. And all of the assets and all of the security and all of the, identity that own company brings to this party for an enterprise, for a mid-size organization and above. That also becomes a major game changer in the utilization of agentic, because a lot of these organizations have not been able to get it across the finish line, get AI across the finish line, because they can't guarantee at the compliance and risk and legal assessment with the CISO, with IT, with governance, that there are those guardrails in place around the data. There isn't so much worry about the algorithm. It's not so much worry about what query you're going to put in or what agent you're going to build. It's what's that agent going to do with the data? How is it going to access it? But what could it leak? Right? What could it accidentally reveal to the world? And those are some significant security questions that people have been asking, and that has slowed the broad implementation beyond kind of that POC, I've got FOMO and my board wants to know what I'm doing, kind of experiment, into broad production and use. So I think that bringing things like OWN into the conversation and having that really rich, robust security and governance conversation is also a big difference when we start to look, at those two, 1.0 and 2.0. But I'm going to ask a question. I'm hijacking Charlie's questions. Anyone else think it's highly funny that we're using software terms like 1.0 and 2.0 for a company that says no software?
Like Industry 2.0, right?
It's Industry 2.0. We're at Industry 9.0 with AI 17.0. So we're really going for it. But I think that this second, I think to Rebecca's point, this is really about connecting all the pieces. And I think allowing the really important announcements that went unnoticed at Dreamforce to really shine, right? Because platform was important. Everything being rebuilt on platform is important. It is just as important, in my opinion, as the data conversation. If you can't get everything working on platform together, it natively integrated, flowing through, the ability to have this type of connected agentic workflow and automation across all of your clouds, and then external to that, to Rebecca's point, those third-party sources.
Yeah, that was, I think, the big announcement that, as you say, did go under the radar. The fact they've rewritten all those 360 apps to make a lot of this stuff possible. It's also interesting. One thing that didn't come up there that's new with 2.0, I believe, is the Atlas reasoning engine.
Huge.
Yeah. I don't know if either of you could maybe explain a little bit about that one, about that as well.
I'm terrible at explaining it. No, I'm terrible at explaining it. I'm not going to lie.
So I think about it this way. Think about it as a correcting feedback loop for whatever an agent does, right? So if I send an agent down a path and it gets to a point where it has to make a decision about what to do, that reasoning engine says, do I have enough data to be sure I'm going to be at a certain level of accuracy to execute and move forward? And if it doesn't, it's going to go back and say either you need to give me more data, or I can't answer this question, right? So I'll give you an example. So why this is important. One of the Salesforce customers I was talking to has like 4,000 SKUs, and they tried to build their own agentic AI to enable customers to self-serve on product information, right? So I need to replace a certain part in my appliance. I want to be able to go to this agentic and say, what do I replace? Well, they had originally done it connecting Einstein with Azure to ChatGPT with Microsoft Copilot. And what they found, that because that reasoning engine wasn't there, rather than saying, what of the 4,000 of our appliances do you have, the AI would go to all of the information about that type of part, aggregate an answer based on all of the data that it had, and come back and say, here you go, which was giving it crazy hallucinations, right?
Yeah.
Because it was telling it was in different places, different sizes, different SKUs, different tools to change it, all this sort of thing. What the reasoning agent enables them to do is point at the entire product catalog, the instructions for every SKU, and the reasoning engine knows, because it's in its instructions, I need to know which, it has that sense, I need to know which product it actually is before I can direct the customer in the right way. So it knows how to ask the customer enough questions to determine what product are we actually talking about, so I can ensure that I'm giving you the right answer.
It's about absolutely, and it's so interesting that that's how they applied it. So I love that. I love that example. When we think about the reasoning engine, with AI and with ML, so any process or any automated process, it will follow the line that it is told to follow. Yet human conversation, human process, business does not follow a traditional line as much as we'd like to think that it does, right? It will, a person will ask a question, and then all of a sudden they'll be like, oh yeah, and by the way, I also want to know if my product shipped. So you have this massive catalog of products, and imagine a human that does not work at the organization trying to figure out how to ask their questions about that product, right? And then also, I want to know if it shipped. And oh, by the way, when's the next thing coming out? So humans like talk and communicate and engage in this frenetic, hectic manner. What a lot of what the reasoning engine is also doing is creating an orchestration path to allow the branches of that conversation to be identified, parsed, and answered, so that you are able to go off and have all of these kind of wild reasons and wild actions, yet still all bring it back into a reasonable flow, into a reasonable conversation. So the thing that really impresses me about it is really more about the capacity for orchestration that begins to mimic human understanding. It is not human understanding. And I think that in all the times that Salesforce has walked everyone through the structure of the reasoning engine, it's like, this is about enabling agentic resources to follow the many broken paths and resolve and self-heal those paths in order to come to the resolution expected of the agent. So it's about the broken data. It's about the process that doesn't make sense. It's about understanding disconnected, potentially SKUs from 3 different product lines of the same type of brand, right? So it's really about that chaos that we process on the daily, really enabling machines to now process and orchestrate in a very similar manner.
And the real downstream impact is, rather than giving me an answer that I want to hear because I get some data that sort of looks like what I'm supposed to be answering, I get, if it's got to be 90% accurate or I'm not answering, I only get those answers.
Yeah.
So I dramatically reduce the kind of hallucinations that I have, and I dramatically increase accuracy because I have that sort of workflow of checks and balances that says, given all the data points that I have, what are the appropriate things that I need to be asking or refining to make sure that I get to the right answers?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That was really great. I mean, I went off the agenda there, but it's fascinating to learn just about how significant the Atlas part of Agentforce 2.0 is. And I'm going to put us back on the agenda now as well.
Do you have an agenda?
What? No, come on.
Because at the announcement, something that really kind of caught my eye was just how much Slack was front and center. And that's been quite different to the past couple of years, where it was sort of nudged to the side a little bit. And I believe Agentforce for Slack is coming this month too. So yeah, it'd be great to hear kind of how you both think that AI agents will change Slack. And I don't know, Liz, if you maybe want to start on this one.
It's a great question, Charlie, and I think one of the most peculiar things at Dreamforce was that Slack wasn't in there as much, right? Because when I kept seeing all the things that we were talking about in 1.0 requires a space and a place for humans to truly be able to collaborate with the agentic AI with all of this reasoning, right? So if you just had AI, you wouldn't really need a place for humans to want to feel like there's a collaboration space or there's an order or there's an office, right? You wouldn't need that. When you add the capacity for this reasoning and this orchestration, when you add all of that in, people want to be able to say, if I'm an employee, I want to be able to say, if that data didn't line up, where does that alert go? Does it get sent in an email? Does it get sent to, you want it to be able to pop up in Slack and be like, hey, we've got a problem. Like, we've got a problem with this process. We've got a problem that's going on. I think that the reality is here is that in the vision of Slack as the digital HQ, remember that messaging chestnut from a couple years ago? And everyone was like, is it? Like, everyone was like, and that's cute. Okay, like, I'm going to Rick Astley that. This brings that vision into a very different focus and a really interesting focus, because does Slack become the digital HQ for a hybrid workforce that includes agentic AI? And I think that is what we're looking at. And I think the thing we can't ignore is the leadership change that happened right before Dreamforce that now makes this possible. Right? Because, listen, there isn't anyone, I think anyone at Salesforce or anyone outside of Salesforce really trusts to make that big dream happen other than Parker, right? I think we look at that and go, oh, okay, the ship is going to be righted in a very dramatic way. And I think that this vision of a digital HQ beyond, this is a collaboration space. This is, like, let's put some video in here. Let's have some huddles in the background. All of a sudden it becomes, now with Agentforce, how much work can we do? But how much can we really transform what we've all been yapping about for years in this concept of future of work? This is how agentic AI, this is how an agent really becomes an advisor. Because we take it into that next step, we take it into that next pane of data, we take it into that next pane of reasoning and operations, and then we literally put it right side by side with all the humans that are collaborating and discussing in the same manner. The fact that you can start to automate an agent's prompt in Slack to kick off an autonomous process, that changes the way that we work. Right? That changes the way all of this comes together. So I think it's really important. I think we're going to continue to see that grow as we continue to see Slack be kind of rebuilt and rethought from the inside out. I think it's still going to have all the fun. I'm really hoping that we have an automated Rick Astley. So like, there's automated Rick rolls in the middle of the day, which would be great. Awesome. But I do think that this becomes a very different digital HQ for that hybrid workforce that they're talking about.
I think, Liz, you're absolutely right. And certainly we all saw the Parker move is really significant for
Huge.
What the vision was for Slack. I think the other thing not to discount here is this is really about reinvigorating the developer ecosystem, getting existing Slack developers excited about developing agentic AI in Slack, and getting the existing Salesforce ecosystem or emerging Salesforce developer ecosystem excited about working in Agentforce, working in Slack, and bringing those two pieces together. And that's going to be really, really important moving forward, because to Liz's point, I've got to have this digital collaboration space now where maybe it's just agents talking to each other, right? In some cases, it's going to be. But all of that queuing, signaling, communication, escalation, all of that kind of stuff that I need as my Agentforce agents get more sophisticated, I need a place for that. And this gives us that. But I think this is really about getting that developer community excited and moving forward on delivering on what the next sort of conversational interface for work is.
Yeah, and I think that interface is really exciting. I mean, if you consider Teams, for example, and the partnerships that it's making with SAP and ServiceNow, so that you can make actions using your Copilot in Teams, just by giving it instruction, it will automate a process in there. But to have Salesforce to have kind of everything together, I think that's particularly interesting, and I should keep it to Salesforce, as that's what we're here to discuss.
But it's funny that you say that, because let's just be honest for a second here. I don't think we can have a conversation about Salesforce and Agentforce specifically and not have the conversation very specifically around Microsoft. Mark is very open, if not overt, about who he's looking to stamp out and stand on.
Well, I mean, and you have to recognize that it couldn't have been easy
Right.
to call it Copilot, given that Microsoft had taken it first. And we've now seen Copilot completely disappear from the vernacular of the Salesforce product story, right?
Not off the website.
Not yet. Takes a little
Which is funny. You're like,
takes a little time. Takes a little
Yeah.
time. But it's not insignificant. And I think in fairness, I think what Mark saw was a lot of customers that were trying to do things using a little bit of Einstein or the Einstein bot interface, but then using the APIs to go to Microsoft, and it was not working. No matter how much they fed it, no matter how much they tuned it, no matter how much they worked on it, they could not A, be sure that their data was secure,
Yep.
and B, be sure that they were going to get consistent, accurate responses. So were there a lot of jabs at Agentforce 2.0? Absolutely. But I think they were warranted by Mark seeing a lot of customers who got extremely frustrated and disillusioned with AI because they had put a bunch of time and effort into building out these prompts on Copilot, going to Azure, going to ChatGPT, and they could never get them to work at anywhere near the level of accuracy and consistency that they needed to be ready for prime time.
yeah.
Yeah, I did think it was interesting at 2.0 how Mark Benioff was very much like challenging his rivals to put agents on their websites as well. And it's interesting that on Salesforce's website, you can go to Agentforce, you can communicate with Agentforce very easily, and I can't really think of another big enterprise tech provider that does that yet. Maybe you both know more than I do on that one. But yeah, that's interesting. I think we've covered there very nicely why he kind of keeps poking at its industry rivals. And I think we've covered a lot of ground there in terms of what Agentforce 2.0 is, the role of Atlas, and the new Slack. And I think that's maybe a great place to end today's chat. So thank you both very much for joining me. And also thanks to everybody for watching. Bye for now.